I am Landon, 35 years old, a soldier in an armored division. My life is intertwined with the roar of engines, long marches to distant lands, and deployments that stretch for months, sometimes even years. I'm accustomed to leaving behind the warmth of home, the familiar streets of the city. But there's one thing I've never grown used to: the ache of missing Emily, my wife, whom I loved from the very first glance. Emily, 32, is my entire world. She has a radiant smile, sparkling eyes that seem to laugh and speak, and a heart that I once believed held only me. 5 years of marriage have passed, and we've lived in a cozy home in Seattle, a place I always dreamed would be my haven until the end of my days. But then, before this latest deployment, something subtly shifted from our peaceful orbit. A strange feeling, like standing under a clear sky yet sensing a storm quietly brewing. Emily began to change. She started going to the gym diligently, but oddly she'd return with clothes still pristine, hair neatly in place, showing no trace of sweat or fatigue. She wore more makeup, even on days with no special occasion. A new perfume, rich and lingering, clung to her collar, giving me the sense that she was preparing for a date rather than a trip to the supermarket. And then her phone had a new password. Until now, we'd never kept secrets from each other. When I asked, Emily just gave a soft laugh, saying she wanted to switch things up a bit. I didn't press further. I chose to trust her, completely. I told myself it was probably just a woman wanting to feel beautiful, to stay vibrant while her husband was away. That thought lightened my heart. Who wouldn't want their wife to always shine? But deep down, a tiny drop of doubt fell silently, colorless and soundless. I forced myself to brush it aside. Our time together was running short. In a few days, I'd be leaving her again. On the last day before my departure, I sat on the sofa, quietly watching Emily bustle about in the kitchen. She wore the pale green dress I loved, her hair tied up neatly, softly humming an old song. In that moment, my heart felt both warmed and wrenched. "I'm going to miss you so much," I said, my voice hoarse. Emily turned, her eyes glinting with that familiar tenderness, a sweet smile blooming on her lips. "Me too, Landon. Take care of yourself, okay?" We hugged tightly, and that time the scent of her new perfume enveloped me, stronger than ever, as if it were trying to conceal something. I'm not one to be overly suspicious, but I love Emily so deeply that I just wanted to keep an eye on her, even if only through a screen. So before leaving the house, I quietly installed a small camera in the living room. That day, Emily said she was going to her hometown to visit friends and left early in the morning. When I woke up at 6 a.m., she was already gone. I silently brewed a cup of coffee, prepared breakfast, and set up the camera, hoping only to catch glimpses of her peaceful moments. Reading a book, cooking, or simply lounging on the sofa watching a movie. For me, those glimpses would be enough to carry me through the unsteady days of being away. On the day I left, Emily saw me off at the airport. Under Seattle's pale sunlight, she wore a white sweater, standing quietly, gently waving as I entered the security checkpoint. "I'm going out with friends tonight," she said, her voice light as a breeze. "Have fun," I replied with a smile, trying to stay composed. That moment, Emily standing there, her hair lightly dancing in the sunlight, her smile tinged with sadness, etched itself deeply into my mind. I didn't know it would be the last time I'd look at her with a heart still whole. The first days of the deployment passed in a whirlwind of activity. I was stationed at a remote base, surrounded by nothing but sand, howling winds, and grueling training sessions that numbed my body to the core. But every night when I returned to my simple tent amid the cold echoes of the desert, I would open my phone and connect to the silent camera back home. The screen lit up, revealing the familiar living room. Sometimes it was just an empty space. Other times Emily would glide through, holding a coffee mug or pressing her phone to her ear, a faint smile on her lips. She wore comfortable clothes, her hair loosely tied, exuding a natural, captivating beauty. Seeing her like that, my heart softened. I let out a quiet sigh, chuckling at myself, I'm being way too paranoid. But then, that fateful night arrived, and everything crumbled in an instant. It was a Friday night, exactly 2 weeks since I'd left home. Exhausted from a long, draining day, the only thing I looked forward to was seeing Emily, even if just through that tiny screen. I opened the app. The living room was empty, not a soul in sight. I reassured myself that she was probably out with friends, as she often was. I waited, skimming through old emails, then glanced back at the screen. Still the same. Empty. The clock crept past midnight, and a growing unease swelled within me like a silent tide. Seattle was generally safe, but I couldn't stop my mind from conjuring worst-case scenarios. I grabbed my phone and texted Emily. "Where are you? Having fun?" The message sent, but only silence came back. I tried to stay calm, telling myself she was just busy. But then, at exactly 1 a.m., the image on the camera flickered. The living room door swung open. Emily stepped in, a radiant smile on her face. But she wasn't alone. A man followed her. My heart clenched, my grip tightening until my knuckles turned white. I zoomed in, my eyes glued to every detail of the man's face. And then, it was as if someone had landed a crushing blow to my chest, leaving me breathless. Robert, my father. I froze. That man, the one who had made my childhood a living hell, the one I'd spent years trying to bury in oblivion, was now casually strolling into my home. He looked the same as ever, salt and pepper hair neatly combed, a dark dress shirt impeccably pressed, his face carrying that smug air of someone who believes they can control everything. Emily walked close beside him, her shoulder lightly brushing against his, giggling as Robert leaned down to whisper something. My blood felt like it had turned to ice. They weren't just old acquaintances. This wasn't just a casual conversation. They were far too intimate. Trembling, I rewound the video, watching it over and over, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, the footage was as sharp as a blade. Robert slipped his arm around Emily's waist, pulling her close. They stood in the middle of the room where Emily and I had carefully chosen every piece of furniture, every framed photo on the wall, and kissed. Not a hesitant peck, a deep, passionate kiss, as if no distance existed between them anymore. I sat motionless in the darkness, with only the howl of the wind against the tent and the frantic pounding of my heart, threatening to burst. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but it all shattered in silence. Emily, the woman I loved more than life itself, and Robert, the father I'd disowned long ago, were betraying me together in my own home. But I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, because the pain had turned to stone. My heart was nothing but a cold, empty void. In that stillness, a voice rang out in my mind, sharp and clear. Don't let emotions guide you. If you want to take everything back, you have to stay calm. Under the flickering light spilling from the corner of the tent, I lay still like a dead man, my eyes wide open, staring into the thick darkness above. That entire night, despite my body being utterly exhausted from days of relentless training, my eyes refused to close. Each time I tried, fragmented images flooded back, jagged and cold, like shards of broken glass tearing through my mind. I saw myself at 10 years old, huddled by the cracked window of our old run-down house. Outside, rain poured in torrents, while inside, Robert's shouts rang out, deafening. Drunk out of his mind, he hurled a bottle against the wall, glass shattering at my mother's feet. She held me tightly, trembling like a small bird caught in a storm. A man has to be strong, has to be in control, got it? I still remember his hoarse voice, his warped view of strength and power. The excuse he clung to for his outbursts, his oppression, making my mother and me live in endless fear for years. I swore I'd never become a man like him, even if it killed me. I vowed that when I had a family, I'd be a good husband, a father my children could be proud of. Yet despite the resentment burning inside me, I never shirked my duty to him. Before my mother passed, in her final days lying quietly in a hospital bed, she gripped my hand, her clouded eyes brimming with tears. No matter what, don't let your father suffer, Landon. That's the last promise I ask of you, okay? I nodded, though my heart was heavy, and I kept my word. Over the years, though I had no desire to see him, I sent Robert money regularly, ensuring he lived comfortably, free from the burdens of survival. And yet, that very man, the one who plunged my childhood into darkness, the one I gritted my teeth to support so he could live out his days in ease, came back into my life in the cruelest way possible. Not only did he brazenly walk through the door of the home I'd built with my blood and sweat, but he callously stole the woman I loved most. I shifted, my fists clenching until they drew blood, my mind consumed by a single question, echoing like a knock from hell. Why, Emily? Why would you do this to me? What did I do wrong? I loved her with everything I had, giving her my heart and my life without reservation. I endured months of separation, swallowing loneliness in foreign lands just to see her peaceful smile each time I returned. And yet, she betrayed me. Not with some ordinary affair, not with a stranger, but with my own father. The man I despised, the man she knew had left indelible scars on my life. Why, Emily? She didn't just stab me in the back. She deliberately twisted the knife in the most painful place possible. She chose the most brutal, venomous betrayal. Didn't she think of me trudging through scorching sun and dust, only to find solace at night in her image on a tiny screen, easing the aching longing? Didn't she think of the vows we made? The sparkling eyes she once looked at me with, saying, "I'll wait." Or was it all just an act? The embraces, the smiles, the sweet messages that now, in hindsight, reek of deceit. I no longer know what's real or what's a lie. All I know is that the woman I once saw as my entire world has shattered everything without a moment's hesitation. And as I dwell on that, the pain fades. What remains is a chilling cold spreading from my chest to the tips of my fingers. A ruthlessness is rising, sharp and silent. Robert, Emily, both of them, they will pay. The days that followed, I lived like a walking corpse. By day, I wore a mask of calm, carrying out every task like a soulless machine. No one could tell that behind my forced smiles and indifferent gaze was a soul shattered into fragments. At night, in the damp, cold tent, when everyone else had sunk into sleep, I faced my unprecedented nightmare alone, through the tiny screen of my old phone. I kept watching them, every night, without missing a single time. Robert and Emily moved through my home as if they were its rightful owners. They sat on the sofa I'd spent hours assembling, ate meals cooked in the kitchen I'd designed for Emily. They lived within the walls I'd poured my sweat and blood to build. Each frame on the screen was a bleeding cut, but I forced myself to watch. I needed evidence. I needed everything to be undeniable for the day I turned this game around. And then on one fateful night, that camera didn't just show me images. This time it let me hear the most damnable truth. Robert's voice came through, low and calculating. "All you need to do is sign the divorce papers soon and I'll handle the rest. The house, the car, the savings account, you should at least get half." My body froze. My ears rang, but each word hammered into my mind like nails. Emily's voice was light, yet it cut colder than a blade. "He's got quite a bit in his retirement fund and investments. If we play it smart, I could get even more than that. Just help me with the legal side." They were dividing my assets, while I hadn't even touched a pen to sign divorce papers while I was still alive, fighting each day in this harsh place. Those two were calmly calculating how much they could plunder behind my back. A chilling fear pierced my heart. I knew the law. Without enough evidence, without meticulous preparation, a single divorce signature could cost me everything. My wife, my home, half my wealth, and worst of all, the last shred of self-respect I was clinging to. I clenched my fists, my knuckles cracking. No, absolutely not. I couldn't let them have their way. They'd already stolen my love, betrayed my trust. And now, if I didn't act, they'd take what little I had left. The following days, I buried myself in my duties like a man fleeing the storm raging within. Military convoys roared through scorched fields, dust clouds obscuring the horizon. At night, I lay alone under a sky streaked with stars, the biting sand-laden wind stinging my skin. My mind was drowning in an inescapable abyss. I couldn't stop thinking, what do I do? How do I escape this quagmire without losing everything? Every plan I devised ended in a dead end. The law was too cold and life too cruel. If I let go, I'd lose it all. But if I acted recklessly, what awaited me might be even more pitiful. I wrestled with myself through endless nights until one afternoon. A rare meal break amid grueling training days. The young soldiers gathered around a makeshift table, their laughter and chatter drowning out the dry wind outside. A rookie, his face flushed red, was being relentlessly teased. "Hey, you really made your wife sign a prenup? That's hardcore. Careful, man, don't let her find out and make you sleep on the couch for a year." Laughter erupted around the table. The young soldier scratched his head, flustered but defiant. "Well, better safe than sorry, right? I just added a small clause. Whoever cheats leaves with nothing." That sentence, it was like a bolt of lightning tearing through the tangled mess in my mind. I froze. It was as if someone had pulled me from the depths, letting me breathe fresh air for the first time after days of drowning in despair. A prenup. 5 years ago, on the day we signed our marriage certificate, Emily had giggled when I hesitantly suggested a prenuptial agreement. "You're so cautious, Landon. As if I'd ever betray you," she'd said, playfully pinching my cheek, her eyes sparkling with what seemed like boundless affection. Back then, I'd just laughed it off, treating it as a formality, never imagining I'd need it one day. But now, that seemingly meaningless piece of paper had become my last lifeline in the tidal wave, threatening to engulf everything. I immediately left the table, my heart pounding like it might explode. My hands trembled as I opened my phone and typed a short, icy message, sharp as a blade slicing through thick ice. "Do you remember the prenup from 5 years ago?" I sent it. No extra words, no explanation. Just one question, one that Emily more than anyone would understand the weight of. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone screen lit up repeatedly. Calls, texts, then more calls. "Landon, what are you talking about? Don't scare me. I'm begging you, listen to me explain. Please don't blow this up. I was wrong. I know I was wrong." The more messages popped up, the colder and strangely satisfied I felt. The fire. It was now on her side. Let's see how panicked Emily would be when standing at the edge of loss, facing the same fear she'd so casually sown in me. In the days that followed, my phone became the most haunting sound. Each time the screen lit up, it was Emily's name, accompanied by messages brimming with panic and pleading. "Please don't stay silent like this. I'm so scared, Landon. It's not what you think. I had my reasons. It was just a moment of weakness. I swear it wasn't serious." I didn't read them all. Her words now felt like flimsy veils masking utter shamelessness. Robert didn't stay out of it either. He didn't dare confront me directly, but every now and then he'd send a few messages feigning concern. "How's work going, son? Holding up okay? Take care of yourself. The military life is tough." Reading those messages, I felt contempt down to my very bones. The man who spent his life crushing and belittling me was now resorting to cheap attempts at probing. I didn't bother replying. At night, I opened the camera app out of habit, but all I saw was a pitch-black screen. The signal was gone. Emily or Robert must have discovered the camera and destroyed it. But I wasn't concerned. I already had what I needed. Clear, undeniable recordings and images. I thought Emily would realize she had no way out, but in her panic, she did something even more foolish. Another message popped up, so naively absurd it almost made me laugh. You don't need to threaten me anymore. I've burned that prenup. Burned it, had she? She had no idea that from the very beginning my lawyer had kept an original notarized copy of the prenup. The paper she burned was nothing but a delusion to lull herself into false security. 2 months later, I returned. The flight landed in Seattle on a gray morning, a light drizzle falling on the dust-stained sleeves of my military uniform. But this time, I wasn't coming back to reclaim a home or salvage anything. I came to end it all. The first thing I did wasn't to go home or seek out Emily. I went straight to the lawyer's office. It was on the top floor of a stately old building in downtown Seattle, where dark wood-paneled walls and soft golden lamplight created a quiet, dignified atmosphere. Attorney Donna, the woman I once thought merely played a procedural role when witnessing our prenup 5 years ago, now stood at the center of what would be the perfect conclusion to this marriage. She greeted me with a calm, piercing gaze, as if she'd seen through everything from our very first meeting. She was the same as ever, immaculate in a gray suit, her hair neatly pinned up, her face betraying no unnecessary emotion. "I knew this day would come sooner or later, Landon," she said, her voice warm yet resolute, "and you've done well to stay composed and gather all the evidence." I sat down, my eyes settling on the thick file she slid toward me. "I reviewed the entire prenup after you called me 2 months ago," Donna continued, flipping through pages yellowed by time but still legally ironclad. "The infidelity clause is crystal clear, fully signed and notarized. With the evidence you've provided, videos, photos, messages, she has no ground to dispute it. As for the assets, she either walks away empty-handed or, at most, gets a token settlement." I let out a long breath. The first time in months I felt a slight weight lift from my chest. "Now we'll draft the divorce petition," Donna said, sliding the first draft toward me. "I'll personally file it with the court. Once it's approved, the court will issue a legal summons for her. With what we have, you don't need to worry." But then she paused, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Landon, this is the moment you need to be truly resolute. Don't give her any chance to delay or turn things around. Everything must proceed by the book according to plan." I nodded, clenching my fists. This time I wouldn't soften. The days of waiting dragged on, slow and broken, like a clock missing its rhythm. I stayed at the home of an old army buddy, Ryan, who had stood by me through the harshest days on the battlefield. He didn't ask much. He understood that some pains didn't need to be spoken aloud. Then the day came, the day I closed the old chapter of my life. King County Courthouse stood cold and imposing under a gloomy sky. As I stepped into the courtroom, the sound of my boots echoed on the tiled floor, each step heavy yet steady, as if I were marching through the final battlefield of my life. And then I saw her. Emily. She sat quietly in the defendant's chair, her frame thinner than before, dark circles under her eyes, her face so haggard it made my heart falter for a moment. She was no longer the radiant woman from my memories, but a small, frail figure trembling in the frigid courtroom. A sudden tightness gripped my chest. Years of love, memories I thought would never fade, came rushing back in an instant. But then, my gaze hardened. I had tasted enough bitterness, endured enough sleepless nights racked by betrayal and humiliation. I couldn't let a moment of weakness undo all my efforts, and more importantly, my father wasn't there. That man, who once stood arrogantly atop others' pain, was too cowardly to show his face in court. Too cowardly to confront me, to face the truth that after all his scheming, he and Emily would walk away from this divorce with nothing. I took a deep breath, clenched my fists, and stared straight ahead. I was no longer the man who bowed his head and endured. Today I came to reclaim what was mine, and I would walk out of this place a free man. The sound of the wooden gavel striking the table echoed through the cold courtroom like thunder reverberating in my chest. It ended swiftly, as coldly as the betrayal had crashed into my life. Emily slumped in her chair, her small shoulders trembling. Tears streamed down her gaunt face, her disheveled hair obscuring half of it. She sobbed like a lost child, calling my name in the silent room. "Landon, I'm begging you, don't treat me like this. I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong." I stood tall, my gaze unwavering. There had been days when a single tear from Emily would have made me cast aside all pride to comfort her. But today, it was all dead, buried under the images of betrayal she and my father had carved into my mind. "It's too late, Emily," I said, my voice low and chillingly cold. "From today, we have nothing left to say to each other." She broke into sobs, collapsing to her knees on the courtroom floor. But I didn't look back. My feet moved forward, resolute and final, as if leaving a battlefield after fulfilling my final mission. That day, Seattle greeted me with a biting drizzle. I stood before the gate of my house, a place once filled with countless memories. The door opened, and there was Emily. She was quietly packing her belongings, suitcases lined up silently beside her. The items she once cherished were now just lifeless objects waiting to be taken away. Hearing the sound, Emily froze, looking up at me. Her eyes were red and swollen, her frail shoulders trembling. "Landon," she called softly, a desperate plea. I stood there, silent. My heart felt as if it were being clawed apart, jagged fragments cutting into me with pain. I remembered every moment, every laugh in this house. The days she'd run to the door to welcome me back from long deployments. I wanted to step forward to say something, but my hand clenched tight. Reason won out in the end. "Leave, Emily. This is no longer your place." She burst into tears, her face streaked with them, stepping closer to me. "Landon, just this once, let me explain. I don't want it to end like this." I stepped back, my gaze icy. "We ended long ago. Today I'm just saying it out loud." Emily collapsed, her hand covering her mouth to stifle her sobs. I turned away, walking upstairs without looking back. And that was the last time I saw her in this house. A few days later, it was my father's turn to receive the bill he never imagined he'd have to pay. I went to the bank and canceled all monthly allowances. Every automatic payment stopped immediately. No more silent streams of money flowing into his account at the start of each month. I terminated every automatic payment under my name for the old house where he lived. Electricity, water, property taxes, maintenance fees, all cut off without mercy. A man like Robert, who spent his life leeching off others, would now taste the same poverty, coldness, and loneliness he once forced upon my mother and me. I left no message, no call. Silence was the harshest sentence for those who once smiled atop others' pain. I no longer hated. I simply severed ties, forever. The months following the trial passed in an unfamiliar stillness. For the first time in years, I was no longer torn between deployments and sleepless nights wrestling with loneliness. I returned to my military duties, but this time things felt lighter. The training sessions were no longer just a way to escape pain. They became a place to rebuild myself, stronger, calmer, and unburdened. The house was now filled with quiet. No more forced laughter, no lingering scent of perfume in the living room. I cleared everything out, getting rid of the mementos that once tethered me to the past. Peace didn't come immediately, but it came, silently, slowly, like the early winter sunlight creeping through the window. Then one day my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, recognizing the number, Emily's mother. I answered, keeping my voice steady. "Landon." She hesitated. "How have you been holding up?" I stayed silent. Perhaps she didn't expect any comforting words because her voice soon choked with emotion. "Emily. She's staying with me now. She's so thin, barely eats anything. She just sits there all day, lost in thought. She says, every night she dreams of you, then wakes up in tears." I swallowed hard, a burning sensation spreading through my throat. But I said nothing. I'm not asking you to forgive her, she sighed. I hope you won't hate her forever. She's suffered enough already. I didn't know how to respond. Some wounds, though no longer bleeding, still throbbed painfully when touched. A few months later, I drove to visit my mother's grave. Passing by the house where I was born and raised, I saw a for sale sign staked in the front yard. I pulled over at the neighbor's house across the street, an elderly man I knew. After talking with him, I learned my father was in dire straits, trying to sell the house at a low price with no buyers. By day, he washed dishes at a restaurant in town. By night, he returned alone to an empty house, stripped of furniture and belongings, all sold off. I stood there listening, a strange emotion welling up inside me. Not satisfaction, not joy, nor even anger. Just a vast emptiness, as if a long chapter of my life had closed, leaving behind a desolate wasteland. Late that afternoon, I returned to the old hill where my mother's grave lay. The sky was a cold gray, heavy clouds hanging low, the wind blowing in sharp, icy gusts. I stood before the simple headstone, kneeling gently, my fingers tracing the faded engravings worn by time. "Mom," I began, my voice hoarse after days of silence. "I don't know if what I've done was right. Was it too cruel, too cold?" I bowed my head, my forehead brushing the frigid stone. "I'm just so tired, Mom. Tired to the point I don't have the strength to hate anyone anymore, but in my heart, there's still an emptiness I can't fill. I don't know if one day I'll regret the choices I've made today." The wind howled through the trees, dry leaves swirling wildly along the old path. I closed my eyes, letting my emotions spill into the silence. Finally, I stood, adjusted the fresh flowers on the grave, and quietly turned to leave. The distant sky remained cloaked in thick gray, but somewhere on the horizon, a faint streak of sunlight began to glimmer. And I told myself, right or wrong, whatever the road ahead held, I would keep walking on my own 2 feet. Peace, perhaps, is simply accepting everything that has happened and learning to live with it.